What's up everyone? In this video we're going to talk about core beliefs. So here we're going to take some time to reflect on who we are as a person, as a poker player. So we're going to focus on how you perceive yourself, what you believe about yourself, because what you believe about yourself dictates the actions that you will take in your life. So what we're going to do in this section is learn from your past experiences, identify who you are in the present, and identify who you want to become in the future. So we will look at the past, present, and future and try to tie this down together. So what can you learn from your past? How does that define who you are today? And who do you strive to become in the future? So if we talk about core beliefs, or like what's the definition of a belief about something? Well, it's an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. So we accept or we start to believe that something about something or a statement is true. So something about ourselves is true, and or that this thing exists, or this is how the world works basically. And so just to give you an example, you might have heard of Roger Bannister and the 40-minute mile story. It's an appealing story, but it's not 100% accurate. I'll tell the story anyways because the narrative behind it is quite powerful. And the story goes something like this. So before Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile barrier, there was this psychological barrier holding people back from achieving this feat. So because everyone believed that it was impossible to run a mile under 4 minutes, nobody was able to break this barrier. Until that moment where Roger Bannister actually did it. He ran under 4 minutes. And once he did, more people followed through and started to break the 4-minute mile barrier. So it's almost as if they were shown that it was now possible to run under 4 minutes, thus eliminating the belief that it wasn't possible and creating a new belief. I can run a mile under 4 minutes. So you can see here how this idea of if you accept that a statement is true, you cannot run under 4 minutes for a mile, then you won't put the effort towards breaking that 4-minute mile barrier. But if you've seen someone do it, you actually know that this is something that you can do that is true, that is achievable, then you might put more effort into trying to break that 4-minute mile barrier. So that's how I see or perceive what a core belief is and how it influences our life. So thinking and seeing the world in terms of beliefs, these beliefs guide our behaviors whether we want it or not. So consciously or unconsciously, depending on your level of awareness, those beliefs will shape and guide your life. So let's take an example from basketball. Like there's a certain belief that tall players can't dribble. So we put them in the post position, basically next to the basket, so that their only job is to call for the ball and just drop it in the basket. I know I've simplified it, but this is basically it. You're tall, you're 6'6" and taller, so we're gonna put you next to the basket, and your only job is to put the ball in the basket. So they don't need to dribble, they don't need to practice dribbling. So what ends up happening is they suck at it. So which came first? Is it that they suck at dribbling because they are tall, or is it that because they are tall, they don't practice their dribble? So the belief that tall players can't dribble, or the fact that tall players don't practice their dribbles, which makes them bad at dribbling. So basically the same thing can be applied to poker or your life. Whatever beliefs you have about yourself, they happen to be true because you will shape your actions and environment around it. So let me say that again. Whatever beliefs you have about yourself, they will be true. simply because you'll shape your actions and your environment around that belief. So because you believe something to be true, you'll shape your actions and your environment around that belief. I wanted to also address areas where it might be beneficial to reflect on your beliefs. And basically those areas would be your beliefs around money. So whether you believe that you can become financially independent. Is that a belief that you have, or actually you don't believe that this is something you can achieve? Look at the beliefs around your skills. Do you believe that you can develop a certain set of skills, or do you actually believe that you're doomed and there's no way you can learn something new? Which leads me to my third area, which is basically your beliefs around your ability to learn. So whether you believe you can learn and grow, or you believe that you're stuck in your situation. So all these beliefs, again, will shape your actions and your environment. And something I'd like to put your attention to is your narrative. So notice your narrative in different situations, because these statements are most likely holding you back more than they are helping you. So some of them might imply a fixed state that cannot be changed. I never was good at something. So this stops you from trying at all because you believe that you never was good at that thing. I can't do X. Same thing again. It stops you from trying because you have the belief that you cannot do a certain action, a certain performance. I always was something. That implies that you are hopeless, that there's nothing you can do about it, that there's nothing that you can change about it. You always were this way. So because you always were this way, there's no way for you to change this, right? But what I'm telling you is that it's rarely the case where you're stuck in a fixed state that cannot be changed. This is rarely the case. So I never was good at. Check yourself when you have this narrative, because maybe if you put more time and effort into something, you'll become better at it. I can't do X. Why don't you try one more time? Or why don't you look at the process behind what you're trying to achieve or what you're trying to do? And also, I always was something. Have you tried to change this since the moment you've believed something about yourself? So if you don't put any efforts to try to change this, of course those beliefs will remain true about yourself because you don't put any effort, you don't look at the process that led you to that situation in the first place. So this is kind of my general umbrella or understanding of what a core belief is. Now let's dive into more of the applicable content. Let's look at our past. So your past is about exploring the beliefs that you have about yourself based on past experiences that you've had. So it can be directly related to poker, or it could be related to something else like sport, school, or your personal life. So I'll try to use some examples related to poker, but you can try to find examples outside of poker if you like. So what can you learn from your success, your setbacks, and your failures? And if you're not sure, you can always ask a friend, ask a relative about what they think you have achieved, what might be a setback you overcame, or a failure or disappointment that you have experienced in your life. And I know failure is a strong word, but it can simply mean something that you're not proud of or something that you regret, You might have made a mistake, or because failure entails sometimes something that has ended, that is over, that is finished. It's not always the case, right? So, but you could still consider this thing a failure. So maybe something you've regret, something you're not proud of, a mistake. Maybe that's how you want to understand or see failure. So what can you learn from a success or achievement? Well, you learn about the skills and the abilities that allowed you to achieve that thing in the first place. So this is what you learn from a success or achievement, the skills or abilities that you already have developed in your life or in your poker game. So let's take an example from my life, which actually, like, basically, before I get there, what you'll realize is some of my failures and setbacks actually happened before some of my success. So the way I describe myself today is not the same as how I describe myself before, because I've learned from my failures and setback, which directed me towards how I perceive myself and the success that led and how it led to my success afterwards. So still, let's stick with this idea of success achievement. Gonna take an easy example from mine, winning Sunday Million. Yes, of course, luck was involved, but you can create your own luck, because I truly believe in this idea that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So opportunity, almost everyone, or let's say everyone gets an opportunity. The question is, are you prepared to take advantage of that opportunity? So that means, do you have the skills? Do you have the preparation necessary to profit from that opportunity? So what I've learned from that experience is I was prepared for it. So I had, let's take an example, your final tabling a tournament. So I had good knowledge of the ICM implication in a final table. I had a set of mental skills that allow me to navigate high pressure situations. So could be self-talk strategies, injecting logic, focusing on the process, relaxation strategies to keep myself calm and focused. So basically what I've learned from that success is I had strong technical and mental skills. So that's now a way from which I can define myself. So I am the type of person who's, I guess, good at poker at the very least. I'm the type of person who has developed some mental skills. So I guess I have a strong mental game. I have a good self-regulation skills. Those kind of, basically you get the picture or the idea. So now what if we look at a setback? So like, what can you learn from a setback? So, well, actually what you learn about a setback is basically the skills and abilities that allowed you to overcome it. So it's not necessarily, this can't be not necessarily be the same skill as what allowed you to be successful, but what skills allows you to overcome a setback, overcome challenges or challenging situation in your life. So if I take an example from my own experience in poker, when I first started playing, I lost something like 60 or 70% of my bankroll in the first couple of weeks and months that I was playing. And yeah, I know variance was part of it, but what I learned from that situation is that I was able to persevere. I decided to study a lot, to reflect on my game. I sought feedback from my poker coach. So here, the skills that allow me to overcome this setback or this challenging situation was my perseverance, my discipline to study, my open-mindedness, because I was seeking feedback and reflecting on my performance. So basically, what can I learn from that experience? I persevere, or I'm the type of person that perseveres in front of setbacks. I'm the type of person who studies a lot. I'm the type of person who's open-minded, who seeks feedback, who reflects on his performance. So all these statements are part of who I identify myself as. Let's look at what I can learn from a failure or disappointment. So what can you learn from a failure or disappointment? Basically, you can learn about areas in your life or in your performance that might need improvement. So you learn about the gaps in your game. And for me, one of those moments of near failure was almost busting my roll when I was playing too aggressive or too high of a limit. So what that tells me is that I need to work on my bankroll management and my assessment of my own abilities to beat these games. So that failure actually allowed me to identify what are the gaps in my game. From a tactical point, it was my bankroll management, and from a technical point, it was my poker skills. So that was near the beginning or near the middle of my career where I was trying to move up too fast. So you see how all those experiences teach me about myself, who I was, maybe some of the things that I am today. Now, let's actually look at how you can frame these experiences differently. Because sometimes a failure or a setback, it can be demotivating and it can be difficult to see a silver lining. So your past is what makes you who you are, that we kind of started to understand. But who you are is actually subjective to your interpretation of those experiences. So if I say this differently, how you interpret a situation will determine how you see yourself. So how can you frame your challenging experiences differently? So instead of viewing a setback as a bump in the road, something that slows your progress, view it as a demonstration of your resilience and your ability to bounce back. So every time you hit a bump in the road, remind yourself that this is the opportunity to show how resilient and how able you are to bounce back. And instead of viewing a failure as something that defines you, view it as an opportunity to learn something about your areas needing improvements. So instead of seeing yourself as a failure when you fail at something, actually view it as an opportunity to learn something about what you need to improve on. So basically what I'm saying here is we're trying to view a situation with a new pair of lenses. So be open-minded, be curious. What are you not seeing right now in your situation? And so this is what this exercise is about. It's about finding what can be learned, or how can we find a silver lining in something that might have been a negative experience for you in the past. Which leads us to the exercise 1.3 in the workbook about your past experiences. So here's what the exercise looks like. And here we're trying to boost your confidence by looking at the skills that allowed you to be successful and the skills that allowed you to overcome a setback. So what skills allowed you to achieve your success? And what skills allowed you to overcome your setbacks? So if you identify those skills or abilities, then you start to have more confidence in what you can do and achieve, because you're seeing actually some of the positives in your life. And we're also trying to reframe failures here as opportunities to learn something about the gaps in your game. So again, we're trying to put a more adaptive lenses on your eyes so that you see failures as something that can be actually helpful or useful to improve your game. So basically this exercise is about creating new beliefs around your ability to perform, around your ability to overcome challenges, and also creating new beliefs around what you want to work on or what you need to work on. So this is a good place to stop the video and go fill out exercise 1.3, and then we can catch on each other on the next slide. So you can pause right here or you can continue with me. So we've talked about the past. Now we're going to look at the present moment, your present situation. And the previous exercise, that's why I really recommend that you fill it out before you continue the video. The previous exercise translates well into what you believe about yourself in the present, who you are as a person. So you can actually take the answers from exercise 1.3 and transpose them into identity statements about yourself. So start your identity statements by I am, or I am the type of person who. And then you look at what qualities, abilities, and role that you define yourself by. So for example, I am patient or impatient. Doesn't have to be only positive. Could be also some of the things that you find might be negative about yourself. So patient, impatient, being impulsive or being someone who's calculated in their decisions, being a hard worker or being lazy, being curious or being someone who's bored or unmotivated. And you can also think about the roles that you have in society. So maybe that can tell you a bit about who you are. So I am a poker player. I'm a father or a mother. I'm a good friend. So what does that entail in terms of qualities and abilities about yourself? So are you a good listener? Are you empathic? Are you disciplined? Are you organized or disorganized in your life? If you look at certain roles that you have, you consider yourself a poker player. So what kind of qualities or skills do you have that tells you that you're a poker player? Because my guess is if you're a lazy person or my guess is if you're a lazy person, my guess is you're probably not a poker player because it requires a lot of work. Or maybe you're not a poker player yet and you need to work on working harder. So this is where we're kind of seeing the gap between who you are and maybe who you want to become. And again, if it's difficult, you can always ask friends or relatives about what they think about you. That could be a good starting point. And let's take the examples I used about my past experiences and see what I can learn about myself or who I was. So if we look more chronologically, we can start with basically what I've learned when I started playing and losing 70% of my bankroll when I started playing because of variance and downswings. So I persevered, I studied a lot, I reflected on my game, I sought feedback from my poker coach. So the skills that allow me to overcome this was perseverance, like I've said, discipline, open-mindedness. So how do I transform this into I statements? So I am perseverant, I don't give up in the face of obstacles, I work harder when times are tough, I believe in my ability to improve. So all of these are identity statements about how I see myself or who I believe I am. Let's actually look at what I consider one of my failure of almost busting my role playing too high and too aggressively. So in that period, what that told me is that I need to work on my bankroll management and I need to work on my assessment of my skills at poker. And so identifying the gaps in my game, my bankroll management, and my poker skills. So what I've learned about myself in that moment was I'm the type of person that takes too many risks, maybe uncalculated risks. Maybe I'm the type of person that overestimates my abilities. Or maybe I'm the type of person who's impatient because I'm trying to move up too fast. So maybe in that moment in my past, this is the person I was. Maybe impatient, maybe overestimating my skills, and maybe taking uncalculated risks. But now if I go back to my most recent success in poker, which would be winning the Sunday Million, right? What I know about myself from this point is I'm the type of person that likes to be prepared. I'm the type of person that takes calculated risks in the sense that I consider more of the variables important to have a better game of poker, if I may say it like this. So I'm the type of person that likes to be prepared. I'm the type of person that takes calculated risks. That actually sounds like the opposite of who I was when I almost busted my role. So you can see how my identity changed over time by working on some aspects of my game, like my mental game, as an example. So you can get some inspiration from those past experiences, but you can also reflect on who you are and what you define yourself by. So you don't necessarily have to use your past experiences as a way to define yourself. You can also try to think about who you are in this moment or how you define yourself in the present moment. And which brings us to exercise 1.4 about identity statements. And here the exercise is about writing as much statements as possible that best describe who you are as a person, as a poker player, or as any other role that you have in society, because those roles will inevitably influence who you are also as a poker player. So these identity statements makes up who you are, but they don't necessarily have to define who you will become. If you like what you read about yourself and what you believe about yourself right now, then awesome, keep that going. However, if there are certain things that you would like to be different, for example, if you consider yourself lazy, impatient, disorganized, undisciplined, then you can choose to turn that around. So you can slowly build desirable traits of your identity by taking actions in alignment with that identity. So you can slowly build desirable traits of your identity by taking action that are aligned with that identity. And this is what we'll explore further in the next slide. So before we go there, that's another great opportunity or moment to pause the video, refer to exercise 1.4, and start filling out identity statements that you have about yourself. We've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. Now let's look at the future, so your future self. Who do you want to become? What qualities, skills do you want to be defined by? And so from my conversation with Jordan, that you will see in the additional content, or maybe next to this video, I know that he wants to be defined, well, partly by the amount of discipline and hard work he puts into poker. So if he wants to be defined by his discipline and hard work, that's his starting point to start engineering actions that will move him in that direction. So now what he does is he basically focuses on making sure he embodies the identity of a disciplined person on a daily basis. This is that simple. It looks simple, but it's not necessarily easy. So it can be simple, but it might be more difficult than you think. So what we can understand from this is that we can reverse engineer who we want to become by looking at what actions the type of person does on a daily basis. So who we want to become and what action this type of person does on a daily basis. So first, you ask yourself what qualities or skills you'd like to be defined by. And then you ask yourself what's one action that best represents that type of person. And by repeating those actions on a daily basis, you are slowly creating your own self, your ideal self, and basically who you want to become. So that's step number 3. Once you've filled out what you've learned from your past experiences, and then once you've filled out who you believe you are in the moment, then you can look at who you want to become, what your ideal self looks like. So which brings us to the exercise 1.5, which is about who you want to become. And similar to the previous exercise, it's about writing statements that best describe your ideal self. And here we're trying to build a proven record for the type of person you want to become. So the more you repeat those actions, the more you'll start believing you are the type of person. And so those examples here, I am a curious person. So what's one way to put that into action? Well, I study or I learn for 30 minutes every day. That's my definition of a curious person. So that's how I will embody this identity. I'm a poker player. Well, what does a poker player do? They play 4, 5, 6 days a week. So if you're not putting the time, I'm not sure you could identify yourself as a poker player. I'm a disciplined person. Well, maybe that means that I never missed a Sunday MTT session, right? That would be a definition of someone who's disciplined, for example. And that's something that is quite achievable and somewhat easy, like never missing one day, one specific day, instead of saying I'm always playing 6 days a week, for example. That might be more difficult to embody. But this is something we'll explore further down the mental game bundle. Final point I wanted to make before we end this video. One last reflective piece here is, have you considered other contexts in your life in which you've had success, in which you've performed well? And so what can you learn from those other contexts? And how is that transferable to poker? So let me give you an example. I've worked with a poker player who has previously worked in the business world. And so we quickly realized by working together that there are many lessons that can be learned from other contexts of performance, like running a business or playing a competitive sport or the performing arts. And what we can learn from these contexts can be sometimes transferable to poker. So let me give you an example from that one client who was running a business or who's still running a business at the same time. And some of the lessons learned for him was about the importance of calculated risks. So measuring the risk-reward ratio, basically trying to take the most plus EV decision possible in every situation. Also, he talked about managing his expectations around results. So is this going to be a good business year? And also, what can I expect, or how can I best prepare for the worst outcome in his business? So now that's something that's actually transferable to poker as well. Learning to manage his bankroll is another great example. Managing downswings from dead business periods. So some business, they sell a lot during the winter, and then during the summer it's a dead season, or vice versa. So you get the point. So this is similar to managing a downswing when you're playing poker. Focusing on the things that you can control, which is applicable to almost every context. So I guess you get the point here. So that last reflective piece was about what can you learn from other contexts that can be transferable to your poker game. Because what you might not realize is maybe you already have certain skills that you've developed in other contexts that are actually applicable to your poker game. So that's it about core beliefs, what you believe or what you perceive about yourself, and see you in the next video. Take care.